Hi, Amber.
Hi.
Okay, so Amber, I'm so excited to sit down with you. We've known each other for a really long time.
Yeah.
I'm such a huge fan. And some of the things that I love about what you bring to the table is your energy, your enthusiasm, but I really see your deep care for your clients. And, people are like, oh, salespeople, people in sales. I'm like, you don't understand. Amber's different. What is it that you love about what you do that gives you like this enthusiasm in such a genuine way? And what is it about Eved that brings that genuine enthusiasm to the table?
I would say what I love about what I do, for me, kind of like you, but in a different way. I always look to you as somebody who you're a problem solver, right? Like your brain works in a way if somebody has a problem and I know how to engineer that through technology. While I don't have the same engineering brain as you, I think through the same thing, right? Like how do we take something that's happening and reverse engineer it to make it a better process? And backing into why that translates into Eved is because like I have the tools to be able to do that, whether it be the people, the technology, so many different aspects and components to what we do and the value that we can offer. We impact such a wide variety of people within an organization, whether it be a large corporation or on a film and TV production. It's not about a singular process. It's about how different groups of people are coming together and working together and how we can make that workflow better. And I really enjoy that.
You lead sales and marketing in Eved. Talk to us a little bit about your role in Eved and a little bit about your team.
So I'm the Senior Vice President of Revenue for Eved. So I oversee all of sales and marketing. And I think what our team really cares about is similar to what you were saying before, is we care about solving problems, right? So it's not just about, this isn't used car sales, right? Like I hear people talk about that all the time and you sort of made mention to that, like a typical salesperson. I think I look at my team both on the sales side and the marketing side as consultants, right? Like we genuinely care about our customers. We genuinely care about the challenges they have. And we want to offer a solution to provide them a better way to do their work, right?
You've worked in a number of different places in your career. What makes Eved unique?
For me, there's a lot of components to what makes Eved unique. So first and foremost, I would say that I've never felt more embraced by a company in the sense that like, what I have to say is heard and it's valued and it's implemented, and it's not just me, right? It's everybody across the company, no matter what the job is, no matter what the title is, no matter what, department or whatever, wherever they sit within the company. I think that what makes Eved so unique is that we're small enough to take into consideration everybody's opinions, everybody's experience, right? We all have different backgrounds. And I think it makes us a lot better as opposed to, right, in the past, I've worked for much larger organizations. You're a number, right? And because you're a salesperson, product's not listening to you, or because you're in marketing, tech isn't listening to you or whatever it is. And I feel like within our organization, it doesn't matter if you're in sales, if you're in marketing, if you're in product, if you're customer success, if you're help desk, right? There's so many components to what we do, and everybody's touching customers or having exposure to the problems we're trying to solve in a different way. And all of that bubbles up, right? Like we really foster communication at the company. That's not just, stay in your lane. It's like we encourage people to get out of their lane and really impact change. So I love that.
And how does that affect the experience that the client has?
Obviously in a positive way. I think that because, and I'm thinking through some of the exercises we're going through right now, right? Where we have some of our salespeople, right? They're salespeople in nature, but very product minded and focused. And they're providing feedback back to our product team and our engineering team. Hey, here's what our customers are saying. Here's how they want to see it set up. This is how it should operate in the right way. Because we go through that, right, it impacts our clients in a super positive way, because it's not just about somebody sitting in an office who doesn't understand what the person, on the job is doing. It's like, these are the people that have worked those jobs or who are talking to the people who work those jobs all the time, every day, day in and day out. And so we really foster, right, bringing that communication back and providing that feedback so we can all be better. Because again, our engineers might know how to build something, but they might not fully understand the product or the workflow, right? So that's where cross collaboration between departments and teams is really great.
And I think that is unique, right? I think one of the biggest things that companies struggle with, especially tech companies, is that people work in silos, and that what is the customer's voice gets lost in translation coming all the way around. And I know that something is such a big focus for us. So how do you see within EVED that we make sure that the customer voice doesn't get lost and the communication channel works to be able to bring back, like I love that I just saw an email from one of our customers. We just came out with our dashboards, and one of the customers were like, oh my gosh, we're so excited. All these things that we really wanted are there. And I was like, okay, that to me was like, okay, we were successful in our communication loop.
Yeah. I think what we do differently as a company, and it's similar to what I was just saying, but the people on the front lines at our company, so front lines meaning we're dealing with the customers day in and day out. We're talking to the customers day in and day out. That's both on the sales side, on customer success, right? Help desk, everything. Those are the people, like the way our company is structured is that, some of the people that have the most exposure to our clients also have the biggest voice when it comes to product development, what our roadmap looks like. So I think that makes a big difference in terms of being able to deliver for our clients.
When you get to see both our industries, the meetings and event industry and the production industry, talk to us about like how you view these industries and what's exciting about the industries and being able to provide solutions within these industries.
Well, think about what we service, right? It's the most creative industries in the world. And what makes that unique, right, is that, meetings and events, we've all been to events. We attend live events. We've been to conferences or trade shows or president's clubs or whatever that looks like. So at least me personally within my career, like I've had exposure to all of that. So understanding what goes into all of that and all of the planning and the work behind the scenes is really cool. But then on the flip side, right, within the film and TV space, I mean, we're all consumers of that content, right? So being able to understand, again, deeply what goes in behind the scenes, it's not just about, what actor do we choose or what person do we put on set. I mean, it's all of the things happening behind the scenes down to we just had the conversation of, petty cash and fraud, right? There's so much going on within these creative industries where, payments are moving quickly, deposits are happening quickly, changes are always happening. We're jumping from one location to another, change orders, you name it. There's so much going on, but the end result is something we can all relate to because we've all experienced.
What do you hear as kind of the top 3 pain points from, whether from meetings and events, from production, from both, and how do we bring solutions to those pain points?
So I'd say number 1 is sort of visibility into all that we do, right? So from a spend perspective specifically, whether it's a film or a TV show or it is a meeting and event, right? It's figuring out what is everything that went into putting that on, right? And all the dollars and cents that are spent. That's a huge challenge.
Especially on the meeting side, it's like the wild, wild west. And nobody can really see the line item detail of what they're doing. Right. Or if you're looking at it's a budget by budget and you can't see it like across. So I think that film and TV do a nice job. Eventually, they usually get that data way after and they don't get it in real time, which could affect a lot better changes. Right. But they eventually have it. I think their miss is they can't see it across.
Yes.
And being able to make right. Yeah. Everything's siloed. So being able to see it in that level across. And I think especially with AI, there's huge opportunities if you have that all centralized versus the meeting side, they're lost altogether, right? They really, it's like such a wild, wild west in terms of the lost spend, right?
Well, and on the meetings and event side, that specifically, since I've been with this company, I would say with pretty well certainty, we've probably talked to 400, right, of the Fortune 500, like a good majority of those companies, whether they be customers of ours today or prospective clients or, any of that sort. But what happens, right, is spend gets lost. We have these legacy finance systems that just don't move quickly enough, right? We're dealing with deposits and one-off payments, managing a tremendous amount of vendors that are being onboarded, and it's taking 12 weeks to get out one payment, right? Because that's corporate policy. It just doesn't work. So then what happens, right, is they open up these credit cards or these meeting cards or, T&E cards. It doesn't matter. There's a variety of card products. And so what's happening there is spend's getting lost between the two systems. The best story I have, and I tell this one all the time to prospective clients, to friends, to whomever, was being invited into a very global brand, well-known. Anybody in the world would know who they are. I obviously won't name them. But sitting down with several executives And I asked, why did you invite us here today? And they said, well, we spend somewhere between $40 and $400 million a year on meetings and events, but we couldn't tell you exactly how much, with whom, on what.
There you go.
It was wild.
And that is really in so many, like, and I guess that's the real, somebody's listening and they're wondering, go and see. We tell them, go see, can you pull a report? How long does it take you to be able to figure out what your spend is in meetings and events? And if you can't, if it's months, which most of them would do, and they'll take months to dig through things and then come back and give you a range, then you know there is another possibility where literally within seconds, you could open up Eved and see all of your meeting and event spend dissected in any way that you want. And if that's important to you, which I think for most companies it is, if the spend is high enough, because it's leverage buying power, it's looking for fraud, it's, you know, it's like a responsibility from the finance department to understand where their spend goes.
Right. And I think that, again, it's not just finance, though. When you get, especially on the meetings and events side, where you get into these large corporations, you know, you have the meetings and events teams impacted, you have procurement impacted, you have finance impacted. Again, this goes to the whole problem of what are we doing? Like, when we go in and we solve a problem, it's not, we're not solving it for a singular department, right? It's really impacting across the board and all the way up, right? And we're talking about big, big dollars here. And even in situations where you might say, okay, it's not as big of dollars, it's, you know, $5 million, that's still a lot of money, right?
I love that. And I think especially on meetings and events, what's the second biggest pain point?
The second biggest challenge we hear is that just getting out the physical payment is incredibly challenging, right? So when we think of payments, when most people think of payments, you're like, okay, well, I'm cutting a check or I'm swiping a credit card or I'm sending an ACH, but there's so much more than that, especially at these large organizations. And especially when you think about meetings and events, because you have thousands of vendors that you're using all over the world or in the US, it doesn't matter. You're having to go through this onboarding process. And when we talk to these companies, I hear anywhere from it takes, I would say on the low end, 4 weeks to the high end, 12 to 16 weeks, just to get a vendor onboarded into their ERP system, right? From there, now they're eligible for payment. What do we do? Well, what happens when you're trying to plan an event at the Marriott and they call you up and say, hey, we've got another corporation that's trying to book this space. We need a $10,000 deposit today, or we're going to have to let it go. It's impossible with those legacy systems to be able to get payment out the door in time.
And expensive, right? So speed, right? Flexibility. And also most of these are one-time payments, one-time vendors.
Right.
And to onboard those into your supplier master, you're going to fill it with thousands and thousands and thousands of suppliers that it doesn't make sense, right? So that obviously it's a efficiency, it's a cost savings, and it's a flexibility. What about the event planners? What solves for them? What's their biggest pain point and how does Eved solve that?
I would say from an event planner perspective, think about when you're putting on these large events, there's so many moving parts and you're having to track all of your vendors, all of your deposits, all of your payments, who you're working with, making sure we had 100 people coming now. There's, 200 people coming now. There's 50 people coming. It's constantly changing. And so they're having to track and manage everything that's going in, making sure they have enough space. All the people are accounted for. All the payments are going out the door.
And they don't go over their budget because that's their job, right?
Well, and what's interesting about that is in today's world, with all of the technology that exists, most companies are still doing this manually on Excel spreadsheets. Somebody's going in and I see them all the time, right? Yeah. They're building these and they're great templates. It's not that there's something wrong with them, but there's a better way.
Yeah. And a more efficient way.
Totally.
And I think I know when I talk to event planners, their number one fear is going over their budget and not realizing it and having to answer to the business. Yeah. Let's talk about the pain points around control.
Sure.
So where do you see like are kind of the number one sort of pain points that they're trying to solve when they're looking to get more control and security into the process for meetings and events?
Well, I think it goes back to the problem I sort of described before with this split spend, right? So from a corporate sort of finance and procurement perspective, POs are the desired way to pay because you have the ability to see it and approve it before it goes out the door. But because meetings and events move so quickly, right, purchase orders don't always work. And that's pushed us to credit cards. And the challenge with that is you don't have the ability to sort of approve before pay, right? So this is the struggle between finance and procurement and meeting and event teams. Like we're all driving towards the same goal, which is getting people together to drive revenue or to celebrate something. There's a multitude of reasons why people are doing these live events, but the reality is behind the scenes, right? If we want to be able to control it and approve it up front, but we don't always have the capacity to do so. And sort of it's this split sort of challenge of what's most important. Is it getting everything paid so we can put on the event, or is it making sure we have the approvals? And right now, like that's one of the biggest challenges.
And with EVED, I think that's one of the most exciting things. When we were building it 15 years ago, it was like, okay, what's most important to the event planner? What's most important to procurement? What's most important to finance? And how do we give everyone everything?
Yeah.
And so if the event planner, can get the payments out the door to their supplier and they don't have to deal with it, because an event planner doesn't want to be a bookkeeper. Their talent is how to, create the best experience. And this is the work they don't even like to do. So being able to like even completely take that off of them, I feel like was a big goal for us.
Oh, yeah.
And then being able to give finance the opportunity to have the visibility and to have the control to make sure the processes are in place, that you're approved before pay, and then procurement. So let's talk about procurement. We talk with them. They're also a stakeholder in all of this.
Yeah, I think for procurement, the biggest thing, right? What we hear a lot is we're going through supplier consolidation. And to your point, right, in meetings and events, it's not always so easy because we're traveling from San Antonio to New York to, Los Angeles or wherever it is. And you don't always have the opportunity to have the same repeat vendors. And I always tell people, the difference between meetings and events and everything else that you're typically purchasing for your company is that we're not SKU based, right? So it's so easy when there's a barcode and you scan it and you know exactly what it is. You can slice and dice it. With meetings and events, it's much, much harder. And I think with procurement, one of the biggest challenges, and again, this goes back to that split payment modality, is that they can see, the companies that can say, hey, I know we spend, $30 million or $300 million a year on meetings and events, but procurement can't always tell you the with who on what, right? It's that L2, L3 level detail that's so critical, right? So they have the ability to be able to look across all of their events and see what vendors they're using, how much they're spending, right? How do we aggregate that spend? We talk a lot of times too, even about hotels, like, hey, we've got a preferred agreement with Marriott and Hyatt, and we have a better rate with Marriott, but our team is leaning towards Hyatt. So if you can't see that, you can't do anything with that, right? But once you have that visibility as a procurement professional, it's so easy for you to go in and say, hey, Hyatt, right, your rate isn't as good as Marriott, but we're spending more with you. We need you to match or beat it. Otherwise, we're going to have to reallocate this business.
And they're using suppliers all over the globe, and they use event planners all over. Yeah. And so if you have thousands of event planners in your organization, or even hundreds, or even 20 or 30, I think the vendor management that EVED has, where procurement could work together with them to create a preferred list. And now it's communicating, here's who you should use. Here is who we negotiated, because you can create all these negotiated deals, but if you don't communicate it out to the people who are buying, then they don't know.
Well, I think that's a big thing too. Even the most buttoned up of companies, we've done several years where we've done these benchmark studies, right? So we try to understand, and we've had great companies participate in these, answer lots of different questions about all variety, right? From how they're paying to how they're managing to how they're reporting, so on and so forth. That's always a factor. The other thing I'll add there, what's interesting when you think about procurement, that visibility being so important. Another example is, sitting with a company who told me we have 83 full-time employees, and their sole job, 83 people, their sole job is to take all of the spend coming out of their ERP and all of the spend coming off of their credit cards to try to reconcile them, to try to figure out what is this for, they need the granularity, right? So you think about the amount of money, the companies that do have the visibility, typically it's a way like that they're getting it, right? It's still manually, it's labor intensive, it's prone to error, right? Whereas when you're using a system like EVED, we're scanning the invoices. It's all automated. We scrape the detail off, goes through QA, right? So there's really no questions. And it not only creates a level of control and security, but also the visibility and efficiency, right? That goes into all of that.
And the customers, we've had some customers for, 10 plus years. What are the metrics of success, would you say?
There's really three pillars, right? Everybody has variations of what's important or what challenges they're trying to solve. But I think it all comes down to security, visibility, and efficiency to some capacity, right? And that spans across all of the teams we've talked about. So from finance to procurement to the, events team, they're all looking for some aspect of that.
And so what would be kind of a success metrics?
A big one for us is cycle time. So a lot of times, right, like not only how we market, but how we measure the success of our customers is an 80% reduction in cycle times. And that starts from the fact that, right, all the way from the beginning of the process of onboarding and vetting the vendors, doing all the sanction checks and the TIN checks and the banking validations, collecting the forms, et cetera, all the way through, uploading, scraping, aging all of those invoices and getting payment out the door.
Yeah. And even the follow-ups, right? Like the reconciliation, there's no more of that. I got to go see, my vendor didn't get paid. Yeah. I remember event planners were like, do you know how much time I spend? My vendors calling me and saying I didn't get paid yet. I didn't get paid yet. And I'm going to shared services and asking if they get paid. Yeah. Like all that gets eliminated. They can look in Eved, they see it all get paid. We can't underestimate because you're hiring event planners to plan events. Right. And what about on the control mechanism? In terms of being able to have all of their data in one place, being able to have all of the controls and the tax and VAT and all of those things that are so important.
Interesting, because I tell customers that Evid, right, there's a lot that went into building the company, but at the end of the day, I think what we've built, and the way I often explain it to customers, is we've blended the control and compliance of a purchase order with the speed and flexibility of a credit card. So it's giving the team both, right? You had asked about control and compliance and where that's important. We're giving companies the ability to approve spend before it goes out the door, but getting it out as quickly as a credit card, right? We can pay same day, we can pay next day. There's a lot of flexibility there. And I think that that's really important to customers.
Can you talk a little bit about the fraud guarantee? When customers are using Eved Pay, a lot of times the fraud comes from the way in which suppliers are onboarded to hacks into emails. Can you share a little bit about why we offer, when it comes to Eved Pay, a fraud guarantee and why we're able to do that in the systems and the process that we do that makes us confident that we're able to make sure that in taking on that responsibility, that there isn't external fraud, right? Fraud that's happening where someone's breaking into a system to be able to steal information.
Well, it's because we control the entire process, right? So from onboarding and vetting that vendor, we have, a secure portal in the cloud that's vaulted. A big part of that too, and sometimes it's happening, it might not even be intentional. It's somebody who's receiving information in an email and they're trying to code it into a system and oops, I put the one number wrong in a routing number, and now all of a sudden a payment's going to the wrong place. What we do differently, right? Because we have vendors that are putting that information in, we're not touching it, the customer's not touching it, right? So it's starting off in a super secure place. From there, it kicks off the entire validation process, right? So again, the sanction checks and the TIN checks, all of that's happening in real time. We're doing the banking validations. Not only are we doing it when they onboard, we're also doing it before payment. So before every payment to a vendor, that entire process kicks back off. If a vendor needs to change their bank account again, it's not an email to somebody saying, hey, here's my new routing number, here's my new account number. They're going into a portal, they're making those adjustments themselves, and then that whole process kicks off again. So that's because we're controlling that whole process. We're doing all the validations. We're validating that, the account belongs to who they say it does, right? And then we're facilitating the payment. It gives us the ability and the confidence to offer that no fraud guarantee.
And some of the common things you hear, just not even intentional, but double paying invoices, paying the wrong vendors, sending something out before it's properly approved because they thought they had the email, or sending the payment to the wrong vendor because the invoice was emailed. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about why that doesn't happen in Eved?
Yeah. Well, the reality is we do all of the approvals. We have an incredibly robust approvals engine, and you can send them to 100 different people that need to approve. It doesn't matter how many people within the organization. There's a million if, then, but, when scenarios that you can build right into the engine. But what it's doing, right, is it's not going to release anything for payment until all the approvals are done. You have a full audit trail. You can look back at any time to see everybody who's approved. And we have the ability to make sure it's not a duplicate payment. Another really cool feature that we put out this year, and it's across both our card and our pay products, is that we can check duplicative invoices across both, right? So you can make sure somebody didn't go pay somebody with your P card and then come back in to try to process an invoice and have us send, a payment via Evid Pay. It's going to get flagged and caught in the system.
Can we talk for a minute about global? From when we started the company and we knew that we were going to be working for meetings and events with Fortune 500 companies, they do meetings all over the world, right? Even if they're a US-based company, they still do global meetings. Tell us a little bit about global reach for meetings and events and how important that's been to serve our clients.
The reality is, companies, regardless of where they're based, to your point, like they're everywhere, right? You think about the largest companies in the world, you think about Fortune 500 companies, they're not just operating in the United States. And especially with time going on, right? The growth sometimes is even greater outside the United States. And it's not just about meeting and engaging here in the US, it's about how do we meet and engage our customers everywhere around the world. And I think one of the things that makes us incredibly unique is we offer an opportunity to companies to have one process, right, globally, which is so unique. We have, we've had customers, another great example. I'll never forget the customer that had, 384 different instances of ERP systems around the world, right? So no matter where you were in the world, your process was different. How you got approvals was different. How you got payment out the door was different. How you onboarded and vetted your vendors was different. So there was no consistency, no cohesion. We have the ability to do that in multiple languages. If a vendor goes on, for example, to sign up, they can toggle right on the website to be able to change their language so it can operate in a more native way with them. We operate in over 140 countries and currencies, and we offer these companies the ability to have one streamlined process from how we onboard vendors to how we get payment out the door, all within one system.
One very, very large customer of ours that has, I think, 50 or 60 different divisions around the world. They've been with us from the very beginning. And when they said, okay, we'll go with Evid, but you're going to have to be able to fund and process payments in all our divisions around the world, including China. And I think we knew that'd be hard, but I don't know that we realized how hard, but we did it. And it is the blueprint because so many of our other customers all have that same need and nobody else is providing that solution.
There's people out there that offer snippets of what we do, but not around the globe. Our offering is really unique, but where we offer what we offer is also really unique.
We've worked together for a really long time and we were both there when COVID hit. It was really so difficult, especially for the meeting and event industry. What's happened since then? How do you see what we've kind of done, from a perspective of kind of allowing the industry to sort of recover? And why is now the time for companies running meetings and events to kind of come back again and look at getting their meeting and event spend?
The whole world was forced to shut down. So obviously meetings and events had stopped. That trajectory kept up for several years. What we saw on the other side was teams turnover. A lot of people leave the industry, take roles within different companies. Meetings and events teams got reorged under new departments or different departments where they hadn't been before. There was a lot of change happening. But I think now, it's just like you watch the news every day and you hear all these large companies that are calling people back to the office. Mm-hmm. So that's a whole nother can of worms we can talk about. But I think the whole idea, right, is there is still value in getting people together, and companies look at live meetings and events and face-to-face interactions as a tremendous way to drive revenue for a company, right? So it's not just about meetings and events, it's about what comes from that, right? All these companies wouldn't be spending all these millions of dollars getting people together if there wasn't a benefit, whether it's driving revenue, whether it's company or team morale, right? There's so many different ways that meetings and events are used. And I think that people are really doubling down, right? And when you look at the news and you look at the projections, 2025 was going to be a bang up year. It was going to be bigger than the year before. And now we're seeing that in 2026. I think companies are really starting to remember how important it is to get people together, and they're reopening those budgets. They're making those investments, and we're really seeing meetings and events take off in a way we haven't seen in a while.
Which is so exciting. And we're so happy to see that back. We're really just trying to get back out there. And, yes, it's awesome that the last 5 years we've been able to focus on productions and have built a really great business in that space and excited to grow. But it is really time, and we're super excited to start engaging again and helping the meeting and event industry to not go back to what it was pre-COVID, where tens of millions of dollars, or in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars, and they can't be as efficient with it. They can't be as strategic with it. And also there's risks there of fraud. I remember one story one of the people on the meetings team, when they were buying Ray-Ban glasses as for gifts for the attendees, which were not cheap, there was an extra 40 that were on there, and they were taking them and selling them on eBay.
Right.
And how are you going to know that from a credit card charge? You're not going to know. You're going to see it says Ray-Ban and it's, oh, okay, you don't know. But if it's a line item and it says this is the quantity of glasses times, to $300 or whatever it is, and then you have that flagged with, wait, the number of attendees was 100 and you bought 150 glasses, that automatically will go into a flag that could be like, this should be reviewed.
Right.
That's a perfect example of something that is pretty significant, and you can't comb through that data, but where Evid could really bring that type of value. What other types of strategic value do you feel like companies get when they use Evid for meetings and events?
One of the biggest things with meetings and events, and this is even a pre-COVID thing. This is pre-COVID carried through to now, right? We hear everybody talking about the return on investment. We're all happy, Evid included, right, to spend money on getting people together. But the reality is, like, what are we getting from that money? And I think it's really difficult to be able to gather all the spend, to gather all the attendees, right? And again, these things are happening in multiple systems. So how do we get the intelligence, right, behind the decisions we need to make in order to make them and decide, yes, we're seeing a return. We want to continue to make investments in these certain areas. And I think with Evid, right, we really enable that because we're capturing all the costs, and it's, the number of attendees is no big thing. Like it becomes such simple math when you have the right systems in place to be able to understand and uncover that. This is something we get asked all the time, like, how would Evid catch this? And I always talk about vendor onboarding, but you had given the example about the Ray-Ban sunglasses. The other one that I've heard more than once, which is completely unsettling actually, is the idea that what's happening is they're creating RFPs, right, to do all these services for meetings and events, and then they're awarding the business to these vendors. But what's happening behind the scenes is they're creating shell companies essentially, right? They're creating their own company, they're awarding themselves the business, they're paying themselves, right? Then they're probably subcontracting the actual work and they're keeping the difference, right? And this is happening all the time, and most companies don't even know it's happening because of the vendor onboarding process that we have, and we're doing all of those validations and the banking validations. Like, that is just not something that could happen for a company that's using Evid.
That's such a great example. And what about individuals? We have a number of different divisions within companies that we service that have a lot of individuals that they use, whether it's for events or for, things marketing or related. And those individuals need to get paid, but the big ERP system won't pay individuals.
Yeah, it's even for like HCPs or healthcare providers.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing. And that's a big one we hear too. With these big companies and their legacy systems, you're sort of required to have a certain amount of, whether it be tax forms or a certain kind of email address, right? We can't accept a Gmail, but this person, that's all they have, right? Or they don't have an LLC. It's somebody who's a DJ or a makeup artist or whatever it is. In order to meet the demands of our customers and be able to help them get payment out the door to those individuals in those situations, is opening up the ability for us to be able to manage paying somebody off of a social security number. So like, gone are the days where it has to be, an actual business. It could be somebody who's really great. They don't have an LLC or they don't have all the paperwork required to be onboarded into your system. And so you couldn't use them before because you couldn't pay them. But with Evid, you can.